Welcome to the February 1st CNY Solidarity meeting. I hope you're enjoying the brisk winter weather we've been having lately. My name is Dick Kornbluth. I'm on the coordinating committee and I'm just facilitating this meeting today. Hey, are there any announcements from the floor?
So our No Kings 3 is scheduled for Saturday, March 28th.
Yeah!
It's going to be gigantic. For those of you who are new, if you would like to get involved, I'm the lead marshal for this, and we will be arranging trainings and so forth. I guess I could put my name in the newsletter for contacting me, indicating that you would like to be a marshal. A marshal serves to keep people safe at these large events. The second thing we have organized for Indivisible of Onondaga County is a first aid team. If you are a nurse or have experience with protest first aid and you would like to be part of our first aid team, I'm also organizing that. And so my name is Lisa Harrell, and I'm around all day. I'm in the protest team this afternoon, and we can speak directly if you want, and I can give you my email. Thank you.
There is a weekly pop-up protest every Saturday at 11 a.m. Visit the website to find out where it will be this coming week, location. And if you don't remember the meeting for the Syracuse lead crisis, it will be prominently displayed on Tuesday's newsletter. So you will see it in the newsletter. Every dollar that we collect today is going to go to the Workers Center and SIRDN in their fight. So if you have not put money in the jars at either end, and even if you have, we will be passing around a basket. So that money that is collected will go directly to them. It will not pass through the CNY Solidarity Bank. This is their money. This is for their purposes. And I can't even imagine at this point anything more critical in this community than to support the work that they do. Everybody in this room knows that the maintenance guy for All Saints Church was grabbed by ICE. Yeah. So they are in town. They are doing evil things, and we need to fight them at every possible opportunity. So there'll be baskets that'll be handed. They'll be going around. Please reach in your pockets and donate. SIRDN and the Workers Center are totally supported by donations. They are not-for-profit organizations, and their lives depend on the support from the community that they serve. So thank you very much.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Hennessy Sayala. I'm with the Workers Center of Central New York. I am the Immigrant Resource Liaison. I started working there last year, so it's been a year since I've been with the team, and it's such an honor to represent our communities and to continue supporting them. With that, we're going to start with a little bit of overview of what the Workers Center is. Can we do a hand show in how many of you are familiar with the Workers Center? Okay, so a big group. That's amazing. So for those of you who don't know what the Workers Center is, we are a labor rights organization organizing with workers in low-wage sectors, primarily immigrant workers. Our focus is to help workers to get information and the proper tools so they can advocate for themselves, to build worker power, to win changes that improve working conditions, worker dignity, and economic justice. So these are some of the things that we do at the Workers Center. We provide worker support, educate and organize, and advocacy campaigns. We do outreach, education, and help workers address immediate needs through advocacy, direct support, and referrals. We look for workers who are ready to organize with their co-workers to make change. We support them in developing campaigns, taking action, and making their voices be heard, be it by employers, media, or policymakers. And this is how our membership looks like. They're primarily immigrant workers, and these are all the sectors in which they work. So this is how we organize with the immigrant workers. We start right in the middle with workers' experiences. We collect their experiences, talk to different workers. We look for patterns. Then we do the research and strategize. We practice skills and plan for action. Then we take action. And the last step is reflecting and collective learning. This is not a linear process. We don't expect it to be linear. We often go in circles. So this is kind of how our work looks with immigrant workers. We also organize to win. These are some of the campaigns that we have been worked in the past. I think one of the more recent ones are the reduction of overtime work for farm workers. It went down this year at the beginning of this year. It went from 56 hours to 52 hours overtime. So that's a great win. We also won the driver licenses. Now immigrant workers, undocumented or no, are allowed to get their driver licenses. And we also obtained the pandemic fund for undocumented workers. That was a very hard time for farm workers. So this was a great win for them to have this type of support during critical times. So now we're going to talk about SIRDN. How many of you are familiar with SIRDN? Okay, well, it's a big group. That's amazing. So SIRDN is a key group of allies that formed during the first Trump administration. When we saw increased attacks on the immigrants during the first Trump administration, and many allies in the community wanted to know how they could be in solidarity. The Workers Center members were directly affected, and we did not have capacity to support all of them. So that's how SIRDN was created. And now they take on so many tasks. They're of great help to the Workers Center. They do a lot of things that we often have not the capacity to do. These are just some of the things that SIRDN focuses on. These are also some of the other tasks that SIRDN focuses on. They support with rights, emergency funds, food. They also do advocacy campaigns for policy change. Right now, we are working on New York for All. I don't know if people here are familiar with New York for All. Yeah, woo. So yeah, we're right now working on New York for All and supporting New York for All. We also do outreach and know your rights trainings. We also have a red of rapid response and detention support. And we also have a group that focuses on media. So some goals for immigrant defense. Immigrant defense work, the reason we are here today, is to support and envision long-term organizing and finding solutions that will ensure true security and dignity for our communities. The direct support trainings, rapid response, and other work to defend immigrants are stepping stones to empower each other and work through solidarity so we can build a future where we are no longer on the defense. Sharing information, trainings, and accompanying immigrants when it's asked of us are all ways to safeguarding their rights. What we are doing is extremely important because we are building up to those that are directly impacted in order for them to feel empowered and hopefully advocate for themselves. So one of the recent wins that we had, I think it was at the end of last year, or it was earlier this year, sorry. We had a member who was pulled over on her way home from work and was questioned by ICE. But with the rapid response group, they got to the place and they were able to document what was happening, and the the member felt supported and she was able to advocate for herself. And she was able to reassure of her rights. She stood her ground, and finally, after 2 hours, they left the scene because they knew she would not be back. She would not back down, and she knew her rights. So yeah, this is just some of the work that the Workers Center SIRDN does. Having the rapid response team is such an important team right now because we're able to be in the scene and show our community support. And that way they can also advocate for themselves. And these are some of the principles for immigrant defense work. Little by little through this work, we are strategically building the alternatives the community needs in order to protect one another. In order to do this, it is important to consider some key principles. As an ally, we let those that are directly impacted take the lead because they have a deep understanding of their situation and the situation of the country. Never assume that you know what is best. Trust their lived experiences because they're living it. They're experiencing it right now. So it's important to listen to those who are being affected. We also have the saying of solidarity, not charity. We're working with them, not for them. We are looking to empower them and to feel them secure so they can advocate for themselves. This goes into having active commitment. There is a place for everyone in this movement, and there are connections to be made across different movements. We have seen change happen from behind the scenes to on the scenes. And all of that requires active commitment to build community power, mobilize actions, and demand change. We have all heard actions speak louder than words, and that cannot be more true in this context. We need to know when we are doing harm than good with our work, and you should ask yourself if your actions are putting yourself or others at risk. Our organizations are committed to organizing and mobilizing in nonviolent ways to make sure our movement is respected. And this is how our allyship and intersectionality looks like. Understanding and accepting your own privilege does not mean you have never experienced struggle or trauma, or that you don't have great ideas or skills to bring. But it's important to understand your own privilege, so that way you're not stepping on those who are being affected right now. Those of us not under that threat have a certain amount of privilege, and that impacts the way we think about action, solutions, tactics, and risks. And because we're not likely to suffer the most direct and extreme impact, we should follow the lead of those who do have the most at stake in order for our work to actually feel supportive. And to ensure authentic allyship, we have to listen and educate ourselves, especially listen to those who are most at risk of losing everything. ICE is attacking communities, bringing violence, chaos, and fear. Our work aims to bring organized support and solidarity in ways that are accessible and respectful to all. We need to think about our movement, how our movement can be in solidarity with others, movements for liberation, because we're fighting interconnected systems of oppression. There are lessons to be learned from experts of the declaration movements and the criminalization of people of color. And if we can understand those similarities, we can strengthen our work movement and build real power. And with that, I will pass it on to my colleague.
All right, so I think Hennessy did a really good job covering sort of the background of who we are, where are we coming from, and I'm gonna just talk a little bit about what's going on with immigration. I'm gonna go a little fast over the big trends. and focus a little more on what's happening locally. We'll hang out for a little while afterwards if there's questions, but there's just a lot that we could talk about. So I think for us, it's really important, like our members have always been in a very vulnerable situation with immigration status. And so we are very conscious when we talk about legal status and who has the right to be here, that we think very expansively, and we come from a human rights grounding, because what is legal is not always what is just. And there are 12 to 14 million undocumented immigrants in this country who have no legal pathway. And so for us, like the long-term solution, like we have to play the short-term game because right now the stakes are really high, but we have to also play the long-term game where people are always going to be in that position, that vulnerable position. And so here in New York State, right, we saw a few thousand detentions and deportations last year. We have 800,000 undocumented immigrants, and a lot of the people who were detained are not even undocumented, right? So just to give us a sense of the scale of what are we talking about when people say deport them all? What are we talking about? What harm would that do, not just to the immigrant community, to our entire community, right? And the vast majority, right, of our immigrants in those positions, it is incredibly diverse. So I don't want to gloss that over. I think people who are from Syracuse, we know this. We have a huge refugee population, incredibly diverse. The immigrant community and how they're being impacted on the micro level can be very different. But it is hugely the Latino population that is particularly being targeted right now, and that's why we're focusing so much on Spanish language in our work, just so people understand that. It's also true that there are some legal pathways that they're just not accessible. They are too complicated. It is too expensive. People can't get through them, and you are vulnerable the whole time you are waiting to go through that process. And that's a lot of the people we see getting targeted right now. Is they're on a pathway, but they're just vulnerable because they haven't completed it yet. So what are some of the changes we've seen this year? It's been an absolute shit show, total chaos, right? We have amazing lawyers. I don't know how they're doing it, but they have set up really amazing systems for communicating and sharing the briefs and the filings so that people can try to respond to the changes that have happened. But some of the main ones we'll highlight is it was basically an internal order, not even a policy change really, but just a change in practice, declared that anybody who had entered the country without inspection, which means anybody who crossed undocumented, anybody who came in and asked for asylum, anybody who did not come in with a visa and a status already when they crossed the border, would not be eligible for bail. You couldn't even get a bail hearing. And that continues to be the practice. If you've been picked up, the folks who were picked up from this church, they will not be granted a bail hearing. They simply declared, we're not going to do it. Despite the fact that even in November, a court ruled that that was not a legal practice, but they are not following it. And so we have lawyers who are now we are learning about habeas corpus, right? We are going back hundreds of years to this right, which has always existed to challenge an unjust detention, not just for people in immigration court, because we know that's not the only place where people are unjustly held. But particularly this is getting used a lot where you go to not the immigration court, you go to the federal district court and argue, I am being held against the law. And so we have different pieces of the government having, not being on the same page about how this is supposed to play out. But that means you need likely a separate lawyer from your immigration lawyer. You may have to pay for that. You have to find somebody local to do it if you have been shipped out of state because somebody has to be barred in that state. It's very complicated. So that is part of why we were seeing our detention centers busting at the seams with people, because people who usually would qualify for bail are not even given the opportunity for a bail hearing. The expanded expedited removal, that used to be if you had crossed the border, the majority of the people being deported used to be you had just crossed the border, like in the last couple of weeks. We held you for a couple of weeks while we looked at your situation. We found you don't really qualify for asylum or any other legal status. We're sending you back. They could do that without going through a judicial process because you just crossed in. You hadn't been here very long. They're now arguing that anybody who's been here within 2 years can be exposed to expedited removal and sent without a judicial hearing. That's why you'll hear people say, keep documents on here that show you have been here for 2 years. That's not because it saves you from being detained. It's because it saves you from being immediately deported with no due process whatsoever. Or hopefully it could. And I'm sure everybody's seen in the news, ending temporary protected status, the expanded targeting of green card holders for very petty reasons, for free speech reasons even, which we haven't seen before. Those are all new practices that have grown the number of people being detained and targeted. The racial profiling and aggressive tactics we've seen, the expansion of agencies involved because they need personnel to carry that out. We've seen all of these agencies collaborating locally in Central New York in immigrant detentions. The 287Gs, which is how they develop agreements with local law enforcement. That is huge. This is a huge way we can impact their ability to carry out this agenda, is by not letting them have access. They need places to hold people. They need officials to run those places. They need people to physically do the stuff. And whatever we can do to prevent them from having that personnel is really important. Okay, so we talked about some of this already. To highlight some of the people with pending cases we see vulnerable, asylum seekers. New York just received in the last few years, right, an increase in asylum seekers being sent from red states, trying to integrate them in a responsible way, and now they're being targeted. You don't get asylum in a year, right? These cases take a long time. And we were saying a lot of our local Ecuadorian community that's being targeted, they're asylum seekers, right? But also people with special immigrant juvenile visas, people who came in as unaccompanied minors who applied and are in the process, U visas, T visas for victims of crime, victims of human trafficking, women who are victims of domestic violence. We have caps, we have quotas. We only give a certain number of those each year. So you might be approved and then you sit in line for 10 years while you wait for the opportunity to apply for a green card because there's a quota, right? And now those people are vulnerable because they have that visa, but they don't have a green card. They don't have a permanent status. And so that we had 2 people in November, who were, one in September, one in November, who were detained and sent to Texas. They were people with SIDG. So these are populations locally we're seeing impacted. And of course, our undocumented residents, right? And this is where I think we like to highlight, this is a bipartisan problem. The fact that our system is broken, in large part, is due to the Democrats also not doing anything to help and creating they're not being willing to really go far enough, right? We don't really want anybody to criticize us, right? Putting their careers ahead of what we need as our communities and coming up with these temporary compromises. We'll create this very complicated, very narrow, temporary thing that this small group can qualify for. And guess what? Then it's really easy to change that. Those are just policies, they expire, you constantly have to fight to renew them. That is incredibly stressful. That's no way for people to live. That's not respecting human rights. If people have a legitimate claim to be here, then let's put them on a long-term stable pathway for them to be here, right? But that's not what happened. And the other thing they did for a long time, our members would come to us with paperwork from the court saying, I don't know, I don't understand this. They would get these letters. You've been in process for years, you had a claim, you appeal a claim, you go back and forth. And finally, they would get a letter from the judge. Your asylum case has been denied, your case is closed, you have no more court dates. Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? Does anybody know what that means? Would you understand that letter if you got that letter? No, what it means is, it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell. You're here, we know you're contributing to the economy, we know we're kind of dependent on you. We're not going to give you status. We're not going to deport you. If you want to stay and take the risk, like if you don't get in trouble, we're not going to come looking for you. Guess what? Now they're coming and they're looking for people and they're knocking on those doors, and people who stayed here and made a life here and have kids here and have been working here. That's why we see people who've been here for 30 years and they've never been in trouble, because our politicians made it that way, right? That's not by mistake. It's not because people went and did something to make that happen. We created that situation, right? Our elected officials created that situation. So that's part of the long-term game, is changing that for us. Right, so and a lot of those people were placed into ICE supervision. Why? In case we change our mind, right? We want to know where you are in case we change our mind and we decide we do want to come look for you, right? Yeah. All right, so how does that look locally? These are actual photos members sent to us of ICE outside their house. So what we see happening, where we see the actual detentions happening, 100 Northern Concourse. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about that by now. Probably a lot of you did the car caravan. And Mattydale, that is the only office outside of like Buffalo or Albany. That's where everybody gets sent for their check-ins. If you're not going to Buffalo, New York City, Albany, you're coming to Syracuse. So people from all over come to Syracuse for their check-ins. And a lot of people don't understand that that is separate from immigration court. That is not immigration court. Nothing good comes out of that place. This is supervision. All they do is detain people. They can't grant you asylum. They can't grant you status. If you're going there, it's because you're under supervision. Sometimes that is a condition of if you have a conditional release of some sort. Sometimes it's with the condition that you report, so it puts people in a really hard position now. If you don't go, you've violated a condition of your release. If you do go, you might get detained, right? So people are making really hard decisions, and that's why it's not easy when people call and say, should I go, should I not go? We can't tell people. The best we can do is help them understand what might happen and how they can mitigate the worst consequences, because whether to go or not, I'm not taking that risk. I'm not the one going to be detained. So a lot of what we do is just talk through really shitty decisions, people, because that's the situation we're in. A lot of following immigrants between home and work, when you have asylum applications, when you're doing these supervisory check-ins, they ask, where do you live? Where are you working? Right? Part of why it's so easy for them to do these targeted pickups is because people are collaborating. People have given them that information. So we do see a lot of that. People tell us, I had just pulled out. They were waiting for me at the corner. I saw a black SUV starting to follow me. And 2 blocks later, I got pulled over, right? That's a really, really common incident. And then the cars are left there and, they just disappear. It's often very close to where they live that happens. Traffic stops, in Oswego County, if you read the paper last year, that is of the counties in our area where we have seen the most collusion with local law enforcement, and just rampant, frivolous. We saw people stopped for, you did not signal far enough in advance of the intersection, you took a wide turn, really like things that there was snow on your license plate. Literally, somebody got pulled over because there was snow on their license plate. Yeah, I'm seeing New York in January, go figure. And then they hand people over to Border Patrol. And some occasions it was documented they were traveling in the same vehicles. So they're not even trying to pretend that they're not colluding in that way. And to our knowledge, they do not have even a 287G agreement. They're just doing it. And we are working with various lawyers to see if we can bring lawsuits on that. Workplace raids, people probably all heard about the NutriBar facility in Cato. There were raids also, people probably heard about North Harbor Dairy in Sackett's Harbor that happened last year. There was a lumber mill in the North Country raided last year. The hatchery up in Watertown got raided multiple times. So there have been a number of workplace raids that have happened. Cato was by far the largest, but that also has had a big impact. We did a big wage theft case. After they raid, what happens after you raid a workplace? You don't have enough workers. A lot of these employers, they come off and they want sympathy from the public. A lot of these employers are places where we have helped workers file OSHA claims where we have helped workers file wage theft claims and other violations. They're not always the best employers. That's why they're hiring undocumented immigrants, because they're easily exploitable and nobody else would accept the conditions. After the hatchery got targeted and they had dozens of workers taken, they were afraid of closing down. Workers told us they were put on double shifts. You want to stay working here, you're going to work extra shifts. And then a whole bunch of them, because, right, what do the employers do? Well, they're looking out for their bottom line. They look for other workers. Who can we hire so we don't have to worry about this? And then they fired a bunch of the undocumented workers without paying them. Workers called the supervisor. The supervisor said, oh, ICE took all your paperwork when they came. Why don't you call them for your paycheck? So we collaborated with the Worker Justice Center of New York that has a legal team, and we filed a wage theft and we took them to court, and all of those workers got their paycheck. It took months, and not every worker signed on. There was a lot of fear, but part of how that worked and why we talk about solidarity, not charity, is the community looks out for the community. That is not just a slogan. How we don't know this stuff. We're not working at these plants. We're not on the ground. We rely completely on the community to help us with that piece, right? It is a complete partnership. One of the workers was complaining to a friend about what had happened, and she was like, oh no. She was like, no, you do not have to accept that. She was like, we have an organization and we can do something about this. She said, call Fernanda. Fernanda's our colleague. He called Fernanda. Fernanda said, oh yeah, we can get a lawyer. You go talk to the other coworkers because you have the relationship. I will talk to the lawyers. She got 11 workers on a WhatsApp video call with a lawyer, and that's how it started. But it relies on the workers doing that organizing together, right? For us to be able to do anything. Otherwise, we're useless, right? Essentially. And not all the workers signed on because, it's scary. And in fact, one of the workers wasn't even comfortable giving the lawyer his new address to receive the paycheck. He asked to have it sent to us because he was like, I know she's doing a good job, but I really don't want anybody to have my address right now. And he asked us to send it to a friend who we know, and I'll pick it up from him, right? But that's how scared people are. They don't even want their lawyer to have their address. But we got $11,000 for those 11 workers, including some workers who had already been deported. They still got their paychecks. Okay, so the court detections, that's been in the news a lot. If you've got immigration court, you're usually going to Buffalo or New York City. And targeting unaccompanied minors, the other way we see them get addresses, if you come over as an unaccompanied minor, you have to, and you're going to be released, you have to give an address. And now they're going to those addresses, they go often saying they're doing a wellness check on the minor. Really, they don't care if the minor's there or not. They just assume there could be undocumented relatives, and that's why they're going to those addresses. So we've heard from a lot of people getting door knocks. And that's often where we see other agencies involved in that, HSI or other people who might look like they are actually legitimate, like health workers or something, which is really eroding trust. We just met with the state DOH right now is trying to do vaccine outreach through local county health departments. And how do you go knock on doors right now? You can't, right? You can't, because nobody's going to open the door for anybody who looks like government. It doesn't matter what good thing you might be bringing. So what are we doing? Just to give a couple of anecdotes of like what it could look like, or how do we work in this chaos? So the Cato response, what did we do, right? We couldn't really prevent anything, right? There were 60, 70 armed agents, 3 different agencies at least on the ground there. No, at least 4 different agencies on the ground there, right? We had Cayuga County Sheriff, Oswego County Sheriff, CBP, ICE, armed vehicles, and lots of, we couldn't even get into the parking lot, right? We were stopped right at the entrance. But what we could do is talk to every single family member or worker who had been released who was outside and connect them to resources. We organized 2 legal clinics. We helped about 30 families in less than a week get connected to legal assistance. We helped some of those people get released, right? We had a woman who was detained. She had a 13-year-old son. She was 3 months pregnant. She was sent to Louisiana, and she sat in detention until December 17th. But we got her out with a pro bono attorney who filed a habeas corpus. And that was the only way. That was the only way, even though ICE has an internal policy to not detain women who are pregnant, right? They're not following their own internal policies. But it's beyond that. When they came, they took files. So now they have whatever information you gave the employer, if you gave an emergency contact for a family member, they have phone numbers, they have names, they have addresses. So we organized some teams to do some monitoring because the big fear by families was, are they going to come and knock on my door, right? Who else is going to get taken? What is it going to look like? We met with the schools, right? Because a lot of what it is, we can't stop a lot of the detentions, right? As beautiful as the resistance has been in Minneapolis, hundreds and hundreds of people are still getting detained, right? So for us, the goal is not always, right? We stopped every detention, but that can't be the goal, or we would feel like miserable failures, right? Part of what we're doing is organizing and building community resiliency so that we know, all of us know our due process rights, and we enforce those on a regular basis, right? Part of why we've had such a learning curve is this is not just immigrants, we also don't know what our rights are because we haven't had to always use them, right? So all of us getting familiar with our rights, right? We've done a lot of workshops, a lot of training, a lot of family planning. It's good for all of us to know how to do emergency planning and have emergency contact set, right? But we've been doing a lot of that resiliency work in the community, as well as helping people try to connect to resources. And part of it's just the accompaniment, right? To push back on this feeling of, being constantly made to feel like you don't belong, you're worthless, we don't want you here, right? Part of it is just accompanying and pushing back on that so people feel like, no, this is worth fighting for. And, we've had people who have hung on and not signed their voluntary departure because of that community support, because they had people fundraising, because they had people sending them letters, because people were helping to do that work. They didn't give up, right? So it's that accompaniment, that solidarity while people work through their decisions about what they're going to do. So two other quick examples. In Brewerton, 2 weeks ago, we had a man who was driving to work who was detained right as he was pulling into the parking lot. He called his wife. His wife is still in Ecuador. She called her brother who's here. He texted me. And because we found out about it right away, we were able to get an ally there, check the vehicle, see if it's locked, see if the keys are there. The vehicle was locked, and the family was like, how do we get the car? We think we're going to have to sell it to raise money. Well, the incident happened like 5 minutes away from the ICE office. So we talked to the ally, we said, are you comfortable going to the ICE office? And she went with a friend to the ICE office and knocked on the door. And after knocking like 5 times, they finally came and opened, and they were able to negotiate and get the man's keys. So at the very least, we could go and pick up his vehicle. We could let him know, that we were there, that we were connected to his wife, and that we would be accompanying him through the process, right? So sometimes that it's the mitigation, the harm reduction. So policy solutions, local 287G bans, at any town or county level that has police or other agencies and resources that could be getting used, that is relevant. New York for All, we have flyers on the table for that. You've probably heard about it. Increasing legal pathways, that's obviously more long-term, but the message we are pushing is not just, ending the detentions. Let's update the registry, right? From 1929 Immigration Act, the last time it was updated it was 1986, 40 years ago. That's the one where if you have been here right now it says if you've been here since 1972 continuously, you can legalize your status. When that was passed in 1986, that bar was 15 years, right? Right now you have to have been here for 50 years in order for that to apply to you. We changed the date, and a whole lot of people would be able to legalize their status. We don't support H2A expansion as a grossly exploitative program. We see farmers and the Farm Bureau talking about that all the time. That is not a solution. That is indentured servitude, and we don't support it. And due process in New York State, CARE, the Campaign for Access to Representation. We need legal services funding. People cannot afford to pay. The woman whose husband was detained, $17,000 is what she was quoted. People cannot pay $17,000 when they're in detention. We just 2 more action screens we'll put up quick. New York for All. You can scan that, but we have flyers as well, and the link tree will take you to all the resources. We can leave this one up. That's how you can get involved. That's what you can do. We cannot centralize everything. We have 3 full-time staff. That's it. We have 2 part-time people helping us. We're really small. You don't have to integrate into our organization or through SIRDN to have an impact. If you want to, you can. But if you're looking for something more bite-sized, like look around, where do your kids go to school? Are there immigrant children there? Can you connect with other parents and form a little group just to monitor at pick up and drop off, right? Like look for opportunities where you are, where you have relationships, and look for these training opportunities so you can understand and build your skills to be useful. Thank you.
Cell phone videos, any videos at all, are they allowable in court as evidence?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the more direct answer. Yeah, they are.
Just wondering, is it illegal to hire and employ undocumented workers? If so, why do we not see any business owners and management personnel facing consequences?
Because they're white.
I mean, a cynical person might say that would be a good way to get immigration reform passed a little sooner, right? Targeting some of those folks. I think we all saw, the response in Cato, Tom Homan, everybody stand up and say, oh, criminal charges, there's going to be criminal charges. There's been no criminal charges. The only criminal charges filed were 5 people who were charged with reentry, immigration charges. No other charges were filed in that case at all. That's the biggest raid that happened in New York State. I'm not aware of any criminal charges filed in any raid that's happened. So I think it's pretty clear, right? Why don't they do it? Because, it's like, what's our drug policy? Who do we go after, right? The street criminals. Like, we're never going from the top because those are the people with power. Because what the interest is not real change. If we were interested in solving this problem, we can solve this problem. It's clear that there's no interest in solving this problem. The interest is having a vulnerable and controlled population, right? I mean, that's my opinion.
For somebody that's the target, is there a one-stop, easy place to check out on their phones to sort of say, like, oh, ICE is in the neighborhood, I should be aware? What's like the easiest way? Is it social media? There's not, like, obviously there's probably not an app, but like,
We
what do you
have
recommend?
the hotline number. We also have people can also call the Workers Center or communicate via Facebook. I think for direct impacted individuals, I would suggest handing over a hotline card so they can communicate to the rapid response group.
That if we confirm it, if we have it confirmed, it goes on Facebook on the Workers Center and the SIRDN page. Yeah, that is for now. We have looked at a variety of apps, and the problem is they all just get flooded with too many unconfirmed and inaccurate reportings that then it becomes useless. Mm-hmm. So we've continued to just, if we can verify it, we put it on Facebook.
Do we have any idea how many people have been pushed through that concourse address at this point? Do we have an idea of what the volume is? And secondly, what is the primary need that your organization has at this exact moment in time from our community?
I will let Jessica answer the first question. For the second one, we are looking for more Spanish speakers because the hotline is such a necessary group right now, and we have very few people who speak Spanish who can take on the responsibility of picking up the calls when an immediate affected person calls to the hotline. So that's a big ask right now.
We have no way of knowing the volume. Not everybody gets detained. We don't know of everybody who gets called there. We have no way to know how many people have appointments at that location. We have cards for how to report ICE, because it is not helpful for you to go on social media and say, ICE is at Salina Street. We need a date, we need a description, we need a location, so we can understand if it really happened and what exactly is happening and when, so people know if this was 3 days ago or now. And there's also, we have Know Your Rights cards that have our hotline number in them. Yeah, if you sign up, we used to have a monthly e-blast, we now have a weekly e-blast, and we do put all of the training opportunities in that. I mean the Workers Center. I know Workers Center and SIRDN, we're working very much in tangent, but we do have separate Facebook pages and some separate communications that we use.
Thanks, everyone. Please join me one more time in thanking the folks from the Workers Center. The folks at the Workers Center of Central New York have been doing amazing immigrant advocacy work in our community since long before Donald Trump, and they're going to keep doing it for long after Donald Trump. So I'm Tom. Some of you know me. So I'm going to say a couple things real quick. Sorry if I go fast. Where do you want me to stand? Okay, great, because we're talking to people online too. So I'm going to say a couple things real quick. So apologies. So first, I want to say just kind of one item of follow-up of something that our group here. So this is a joint meeting of CNY Solidarity Coalition and Indivisible Onondaga County. And one thing that we are in the very early stages of doing that's going to help follow up on some of what you heard here. Most of our organizing work happens through our committees, which I'm going to say a word about in a second. But we are also making some, we're getting hundreds of people at our meetings, as you can see, and we have thousands of people on our mailing list. And so we are going to try to get up and running some neighborhood-based organizing amongst our members. So we're going to help you connect with other people who live near you, which serves a variety of purposes, but one of them is ICE Watch, right? So if you see ICE in your own neighborhood, it's helpful to be able to quickly reach other people nearby so you're not the only one standing out on the sidewalk, right? And that's a tactic that's been used extensively in Minnesota. And so we're working on that. If anybody's particularly interested in helping out on that front, feel free to just reach out to me. You can get my contact info from anybody who's not brand new, or I can give it to you at the end of the meeting today. Okay, so that's in the works. For what's been going on for 9 years is that most of our organizing work happens in our committees. So this is our standard format. We have a big meeting like this, usually with some kind of informational presentation or whatever, and then we break up into smaller groups. We have 6 active committees that are meeting today. 2 of them are meeting jointly, so it's 5 separate meetings. I'm going to tell you briefly what they are, and I'm going to tell you where they are meeting, and then I'm going to urge everyone who wants to go to one of those meetings to quickly and as quietly as possible move to that location. And if you are brand new and not already connected to one of those committees, I'm going to encourage you to stay right here, and I'm going to give a little bit more of a new orientation for new folks. Caveat there, but everybody's welcome. All of the committees are open to anybody who wants to attend and help out. There is a meeting of our protest organizing committee. This is the group that has been organizing, usually in conjunction with lots of other local groups, but has been organizing the No Kings rallies. They're working right now on No Kings 3 for the end of March. This is also the group that's been organizing our weekly pop-up protests and occasional car caravans and bridge visibility brigades. All of that's coming out of our protest committee. And if you want to help out on that front, upstairs, and there's one of the classrooms upstairs has a sign on the door that says protest team. Also meeting upstairs is a joint meeting of our state and local action team and our electoral action team. And as the names suggest, right, those groups are focused on local, so town, county, state, electoral, and policy campaigns. There's a lot of elections this year, right? We got major crisis work going on, right, with our national government, but we also got lots of local elections. Every single county legislator is up for re-election this year. We have state legislative elections. We've got big elections in the city of Syracuse. There's going to be contested primaries in a bunch of these elections in June. And of course, there's advocacy work to be done, like encouraging the state legislature to support the immigrant rights legislation you just heard about. So that's upstairs as well. There's a sign on one of the doors upstairs that says State and Local Action Team. Electoral Action is meeting with them too, but I couldn't find the sign. Our outreach and education team is meeting, as the name suggests. They're working on sort of carrying the CNY solidarity and indivisible message out into the community through various events that we can. Our climate justice team is meeting. As you know from the names, like some of our committees are kind of issue focused and some of them are kind of tactic focused. Our climate justice committee in recent years has been mostly working on advocacy around the micron development in clay, right? And the continuing to monitor and raise concerns about the harmful environmental impacts of that development. And then our legislative engagement teams are meeting here. These committees focus on engagement with our federal legislators, right? So right now that means John Mannion, Chuck Schumer, and Kirsten Gillibrand. We regularly meet with their staff, so we occasionally meet with the actual legislators if we're able to. We regularly encourage phone calls to their offices on particular issues, that kind of thing, direct engagement with our federal representatives.